So a little bit about Arthur McIntyre. I encountered Arthur's work about 3 years ago when I was organising a group exhibition at a Blacktown Art Centre, and I was struck by the enormity of his output and the fact that this artist, who had only really passed away in 2003, and by the time I discovered his work in 2007, the fact that he just had kind of slipped, into the cracks of Australian art history, even though he was incredibly prolific and produced an extraordinary number of works in his lifetime, he seemed to be overlooked and forgotten. His contribution to Australian art history seemed to be fairly unheralded. He was an interesting figure in that he was an art critic as well as an artist. He was also a teacher, and he curated several exhibitions as well. So perhaps part of the reason why he was overlooked might have had to do with the fact that he was a critic. The lot of the artist critic can be sometimes a difficult one. He wrote for The Australian in the late 70s, in 1977, and for The Age throughout the 80s. The earliest works I found in the artist's estate were from 1960, and they're collages that are drawn from an artist book that he created when he was about 14 or 15. So the reason why I included those collages is because in a way they seem to very much signal some of the directions that he took as a mature artist when he went to art school and also developed and set himself up as a professional exhibiting artist in the 70s. So he primarily worked in the mediums of painting, drawing and collage. He wrote two fairly seminal books, one about illustration and one about collage, which were surveys of collage and illustration in this country. So what we've got in this section of the gallery are some of Arthur McIntyre's experiments with gestural abstraction. So in the 70s, he was very much interested in, in that kind of, influence of abstract expressionism on a lot of Australian artists, people like Peter Upwood and other artists like that. And so in 1975, I've described it as a bit of a watershed year for McIntyre because he had this exhibition at Sydney's Holsworth Galleries in Woollahra, which is no longer there. And he put this exhibition on called Slide Series. And these two works here are from that series. This work now is in the Queensland Art Gallery, and this one's part of the Power Collection, which is governed by the MCA. The work behind John just there is called Cloudy Day Feeling. And I particularly like this painting because in a way it shows how Arthur McIntyre's work is also very much dictated by the moods that he would find himself in as an artist, but also, he suffered bipolar condition, and while I don't necessarily think it's the most productive thing to couch an artist's work in terms of mental condition, you cannot necessarily be overlooked that certain kind of environmental conditions would often impact on the way that he produced his work. So in contrast to that, I've placed this work over here called Summer Song, which kind of shows how he would often let the light back in, and there would be this kind of beauty and lightness of touch that would also translate onto canvas. This work I like as well because it also shows how, in addition to that gestural abstraction that he was exploring, he also was very much interested in collage and layering, the surface with the flotsam and jetsam of everyday life. So you see bits and pieces of newspaper that's acting as a support for those, pink and white brush strokes. Another key aspect of Arthur's work that very much informed his practice over his whole lifetime as an artist was an interest in the human head. And he undertook this massive project throughout his whole life where he created these head studies. And he produced them in a variety of different ways and a variety of different styles. Arthur was always experimenting with different styles, and if you have a look at the catalogue, you'll see that his style would change a lot over the period of time that he produced work. These extraordinary works are from the National Gallery of Australia collection, and it's called Bruised Head Series. And so what you've got is all these self-portraits of Arthur exploring, I suppose, the anguish, that kind of psychic anguish that he dealt with on a day-to-day basis. But also, I think that they're just remarkably expressive works that really do kind of encapsulate the emotion that he's exploring. On a, I suppose, biographical note, they're really interesting too because he donated this body of work to the National Gallery of Australia in memory of his sister who committed suicide in 1991. And she had bipolar condition as well. And the credit line, or the collection line, if you read the label, says that he donated them in her memory. This work here is quite profound, I think, because it's called Head After Shock Treatment, and it directly references his sister's struggle with bipolar. But it also, in a way, references the fact that he always vowed that he never would undergo shock treatment himself, even though in 2000 he started to actually undergo shock treatment in the years before he died. The work on the far left, which actually is also on the cover of the catalogue, is called East Meets West, and it's in the National Gallery Victoria collection. I think that this is probably the most important painting that he produced, and certainly it's important because it has a really interesting and fascinating story and exhibition history. And to contextualise that history, I'll just talk a little bit about what happened in 1978. There was a Jackson Pollock scandal that Arthur McIntyre found himself embroiled in. At the Ivan Doherty Gallery, there was a group of so-called Jackson Pollock paintings hanging, and the exhibition had been organised by Ken Reinhardt and Elwyn Lynn. And there was this kind of rumour circulating around the Australian newspaper where Arthur worked as a critic that these paintings could be fakes because they just didn't seem to add up. Their provenance didn't seem to be bona fide. So Arthur was sent down to the gallery to identify them as you know, legit or fake. And so he actually took one quick look and said, of course they're fakes. Now why I'm talking about that in relation to this painting is that James Mollison, who was one-time National Gallery Victoria director and also was director at the time this painting was purchased, was a big champion of Arthur's. And he, at the time, hung this painting next to a Lee Krasner painting as a kind of show of respect to Arthur. These two works are called Token Poses, and they use magazine collage. This work was in the Dobell, the inaugural Dobell Prize at the Art Gallery of New South Wales, and it was selected by Arthur Boyd that year. This work now is in the Meadowbank TAFE collection, and it was acquired recently, a couple of years ago, and this work's in a private collection. This fantastic collage here is called Flesh and Blood, and it was the winner of the Gold Coast City Art Prize in 1988, I believe. And also what's great about it is that it actually shows how Arthur could be quite cheeky with his use of pornographic collage. These ones are actually from the Museum of Contemporary Art collection, and they actually use ox blood as a painting material. So it's really remarkable that the blood hasn't actually faded, and that could be because of the combination of the blood with aerosols and acrylic paints. But also what I really like about these works is that, again, if you look really closely, you can see some almost imperceptible collage elements. This work here I really love, and it's called Sight, and it's from the Allen's Arthur Robertson collection. And why I really love this work and it resonates for me is because for me it's like an archaeological dig, and all the bones that are collaged above, in the top part of the work, for me reveal Arthur's interest in the body and in his interest in collage, but also for me that idea that in a way researching his work has been like a big archaeological dig. And that work's called Recollections of a Blue Mountains Childhood, an Aerial Perspective. So it's actually his aerial perspective of the Blue Mountains where he grew up. But also if you look closely, you can see that heads appear in the patterning of that landscape. So again, the head studies are really important to his work.